Hi, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video, we're going to learn the two-player game, Summoner Wars 2nd Edition, designed by Colby Dowk and published by Plaid Games, who helped sponsor this video. The summoning stones bestow great power on those who find them. Just ask Rhett here. He found the first stone, became the first summoner, and as you can perhaps tell, things didn't go so well for the rest of the kingdom afterwards. Or for his complexion. Yikes. Thankfully, other stones were found and other summoners rose up to challenge him, and they've been locked in battle ever since. This is the 2nd edition of Summoner Wars. The first was released in 2009, and while it shares some similarities, this is a separate and incompatible game introducing several key changes, which are explained in a document I'll link in the description below if you're curious. But don't worry, you don't need to know anything about the original edition. We're going to go over everything you need to know right here. So join me at the table, and let's learn how to play. To set up, place the battlefield between the two players with each person sitting on either end. Nearby, also set the dice and create a supply of these damage and boost tokens. I have mine in a game tray, and if you'd like to get some of your own, you'll find links in the description below. Now it's time for each player to pick a faction deck, and the game comes with 6 to choose from right out of the box. Each will have a summoner and its related cards, which you can identify by their matching borders, along with 4 gates, one that shows 10 hearts, and 3 that have 5. In this video, we'll set up a game between Rhett and Sarah Eldwin, and these are known as your summoners, as indicated here. Your deck will also have a variety of units, several common, and 3 champions, along with events which are known as either standard or epic. Now, you'll begin to set up your faction on the board by flipping your summoner over and using the information here to set up your side of the battlefield. The battlefield is divided in half by a line here, and your setup instructions represent the half closest to you. Here it shows a picture of one of your gates, and specifically the one that has 10 life, as well as 2 units which you can identify by their matching art. This means that you set the gate and units shown in their related spaces on the board. And also keep an eye out for the icon representing your summoner. This means when you're done, you'll place your summoner face up into that spot. All the rest of your cards you'll shuffle into a face-down deck that you set right here. Each player then draws an opening hand of 5 cards from their deck, which they can examine but should keep a secret from their opponent. Then you randomly pick a player who will take the first turn when the game starts. That player puts one of these magic tokens onto the 2 space of the magic track on their side of the board, while the other player puts a magic token on the 3 space of their magic track. And that's the setup. In Summoner Wars, you and the other player will be adding new units to the board, moving them around, attacking, and ultimately trying to defeat the other person's summoner. As soon as you do, you win. The game is played over a series of turns, starting with the first player and then going back and forth until the game ends. And on your turn, you'll complete 6 phases. All of these are outlined on your side of the board, including this reminder to first discard any active events you have. We'll see how you get some later, but any active events you have will be in this area to the right of your board. And in the game, anytime you discard something, you simply place it face down here. How many cards each person has in their discard piles is public information, but only you can examine the cards in your own discard pile. Okay, now it's time to move on to the first phase of your turn, summoning. Here, you can summon any number of units from your hand to the battlefield. The cost to summon a unit is shown in this area along with the symbol for magic, so to summon this Citadel Paladin costs 2 magic. To spend magic, move your token that number of spaces to the left, and if you don't have the magic, you can't summon the unit. A newly summoned unit must be placed in an empty space adjacent to a gate you control. Spaces are adjacent if they share one full side with each other. So I could set my paladin in any one of these 3 highlighted spaces by the gate. But I couldn't, for example, set it here because this space isn't empty, or here because this space doesn't share a full side with the gate. When you add a new unit to the board, set it facing your side of the table. This shows that it's under your control. As you can see, your opponent's units will be facing them to show that those are under their control. After summoning as many units as you can or wish to, it's time to move to the next phase, moving. As shown here, you now pick up to 3 different units you control and move them 1 or 2 spaces each. Units can only move into or through empty adjacent spaces. So that means, for example, this Citadel Paladin can't move diagonally over here. It also can't move 2 spaces this way because there's a friendly unit blocking its path. So perhaps instead it would move like this. Some units, like this one found in one of the other faction decks, is also classified as a structure. These cannot move unless an effect allows it to, and we'll discuss card effects more a little bit later. So again, in the move phase, you move up to 3 different units, 1 or 2 spaces each. And once you're done, it's time for the build phase. Here you can pay to put any number of cards in your hand labeled as structures onto the battlefield. Now, most times these will be gates, but as we saw, other cards can be labeled as structures too. A new structure you want to build must be set on any empty space of your back 3 rows or any empty space adjacent to your summoner. This means, for example, that if your summoner was all the way up here, you could build a gate beside it, and then in future summoning phases, you could add new units here directly into your opponent's side of the board. With any building complete, it's time for the attack phase, which, as shown here, allows you to attack with up to 3 different units. Of course, these have to be units that you control, but they don't have to be the same units that you moved this turn. A unit's attack information is found in this area. If you see a sword, that means it's a melee attack, but if you see a bow, that means its attack is ranged. Either way, when you attack, you perform 3 steps. First, pick the unit that's going to attack and declare its target. For a melee attack, this target must be adjacent, so our Paladin Knight could attack this unit, but not the one here. For a ranged attack like we see here, the target can be up to 3 clear, straight spaces away. A clear space is one that has nothing in it, and straight spaces are ones where you never change direction. So Sarah could attack this unit, but not the one here because diagonals don't count. And she couldn't attack this target because although this line is straight, not all of the spaces between her and her target are clear. Once you have a valid target, you roll a number of dice equal to this value known as your unit's strength. So here you'd roll 3 dice. In a melee attack, you count how many swords you rolled. 2 in this case. And then you add that number of damage tokens to your target. In a ranged attack, you instead count the number of bows as damage. Now, unless you're told otherwise, these symbols, which are not swords or bows, don't contribute to melee or ranged attacks, but we'll see how they're used in just a moment. As units take damage, their life value here is reduced by the number of damage tokens they've acquired, and if their life ever reaches 0, the card is destroyed. This means you discard it, and when discarding, you remove any tokens from the card and then put it face down on its owner's discard pile. Anytime a card you control destroys an enemy's card, you gain 1 magic. You'd again adjust your marker here, but you can never have more than 15 magic at a time. Any extra you collect is just ignored. Some effects in the game will cause cards to be placed under other cards, and once the topmost one has been destroyed, any under it are also discarded. And if that was an enemy unit, you still only gain 1 magic. You don't gain extra for the cards that were underneath. You can even target and attack your own units, though a unit can never target itself for an attack. And if your attack destroys a unit that you control, you don't get any magic from that. Attacking in Summoner Wars is important, so important that if you do not target at least 1 enemy with an attack during this phase, your summoner takes 1 damage. Now, before moving on, we should discuss unit abilities just a little. For example, this Citadel Paladins says that after this unit attacks an enemy unit, you draw cards equal to the number of these symbols rolled. When something happens after something else, you must fully resolve that something else first. So in this case, you'd fully resolve the attack, damage, remove any destroyed cards, gain magic, and so on. And then you check to see how many of these symbols you rolled during the attack and draw that number of cards. We're not going to go over all the abilities in this video as there's loads of them, but if you're ever unsure of how an ability works, you can look up the keywords from it in the glossary at the back of the rulebook to get a better understanding. For example, on this unit, it uses the word replace, which would be explained here if it wasn't clear how that worked. Once your attacks are over, it's time to move to the next phase of your turn, Magic. Here you simply discard as many cards as you like from your hand and gain 1 Magic for each. Then it's time for the draw phase. If you have fewer than 5 cards in hand, you draw back up to 5 if you're able. And the number of cards in your draw pile is public information. However, if your draw pile ever runs out, you do not reshuffle your discard pile back into it. This means you won't be able to draw up at the end of your turn, and you'll have to just play the rest of the game with what you have left. Now, after the draw phase of your turn is over, and the next player goes. And the game will continue back and forth like this until only one player's summoner remains on the battlefield. As soon as that happens, that player wins. Now though, let's go over a few additional rules that we need to be aware of. In addition to units, you'll also have events in your deck, as indicated here, and these will tell you when the event can be played. In this case, during the move phase. The catch is that you can't have an event interrupt another action that you're currently taking. For example, if you were moving a unit 2 spaces, you couldn't move it 1 space and then play the event and then finish its move after. You'd need to move the unit, resolve anything related to that move, and then you could play the event. And after, if you wanted to move a different unit, that would be fine. To play an event, pay its cost, which in this case is 1 Magic, and then resolve its effect here. In this situation, it says you remove 2 damage from each friendly, common, and champion unit within 2 spaces of your summoner. When an effect, like this one here, says to target something within a certain number of spaces, in this case within 2 spaces of your summoner, you cannot count diagonally. So I could not target this unit. However, I could count 1, 2 to this unit, and unless the effect says the spaces must be clear, you can count through other units or structures on the board. So Mass Heal could target this unit. Either way, once the event has been resolved, you then discard it. Some events have the keyword active here, and once played, you instead put them in your active events area. And you can have any number of active events in play, and their abilities will be ongoing until the start of your next turn, which, as we saw, is when your active abilities are discarded. Also keep in mind, if an effect requires you to pick a target, you cannot pick the unit itself that is causing the effect. For example, Abua's Spirit Bond ability says that after this unit moves, you may target a friendly unit within 3 spaces, but Abua could not target itself. Some abilities may refer to boosting. For example, this Lioness says that after it attacks an enemy unit, you boost the Lioness, which means you place one of these boost counters on it. A unit can have any number of boost tokens, and these will usually affect that unit. For example, in this case, it gets 1 extra life for each boost token on it. Others, like this Border Archer, can instead spend their boost tokens, returning them back to the supply. For example, after this unit attacks, you can spend 1 boost on it to resolve an extra attack with it, which doesn't count against your usual limit of 3 attacks per attack phase. Now, some effects, like the one we see here, will tell you to force a card 1 or more spaces. This means that you slide it that many clear spaces in a single direction. But forcing is not considered moving, so any effects that resolve after a move occurs do not resolve because something got forced. Also, I should mention that if you ever have 2 or more game effects that would occur at the same time, the player whose turn it is decides the order in which those effects would resolve. And remember, if you have any questions about how an effect works, you can look up the words you're unsure about in the glossary here. You can also refer to this page if you want to learn how to construct your own custom decks, and I'll leave this for you to look into once you're ready. But in short, once you've picked a summoner, check over its symbols in this area, and then you'll be able to add cards to its deck as long as they have at least one of those symbols. The other details about deck building I'll leave for you to discover on your own, and keep in mind, new summoner decks will be releasing in the future to expand the game with even more options. But otherwise, that's everything you need to know to play Summoner Wars. If you have any questions about anything you saw here, feel free to put them in the comments below, and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, other videos, and lots more over on the games page at Board Game Geek, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like, subscribing, and clicking that little bell icon so you get notification anytime we post a new video. But until next time, thanks for watching.